For 50 years, James and I never had a proper wedding. At first he claimed we didn't have enough money and that a wedding didn't matter as long as we were together. Then as the years went by, he said we had been husband and wife for so long that a wedding was unnecessary. But on our 50th wedding anniversary he threw a grand wedding, one that had the entire town buzzing. Not with me but with Emma, the woman he'd loved all along. From a distance I watched my husband, dressed in his finest suit, holding another woman tightly in his arms. The crowd cheered, and among them was my son Grace, celebrating the union as if it were the happiest day of his life. I stood frozen, alone, and thought back on our marriage. 50 years, a journey from when we first squeezed into a tiny rental to the beautiful house and garden we built together. From raising Grace to now, helping take care of my grandson Ben, just as I once cared for him. I had given everything for 50 long years. I had had enough. James came home still wearing the same suit, though now there was a lipstick stain on the collar. Grace and his family followed closely behind him. I sat alone on the couch, a stranger in my own home. The lights flicked on, revealing my silent figure. Grace asked in surprise, "Mom, what are you doing here?" I let out a cold laugh. The question seemed absurd. I had lived in this house for over 50 years. And now my son was questioning why I was here. I didn't answer, and Grace's tone softened, feigning concern. "Why aren't you in bed? Sitting here in the dark like this is creepy." I turned to look at them, my voice steady but cold. "Where were you all today?" James, having just changed his shoes, strolled into the living room pretending to be ignorant. His voice was casual. "What's wrong? You're acting strange today." I demanded, "I just want to know where you all were. What did you do?" My fury was impossible to contain. For the first time I was truly angry. They all stared at me in disbelief. "Mom, what's gotten into you? Why are you being so dramatic?" Grace said, his voice dripping with impatience. "We didn't go anywhere special, just some errands." He lied. I shifted my gaze from him to James. He didn't speak, silently agreeing with the lie. How pathetic. I pulled out my phone and showed them a video. James in his suit, kissing Emma at the altar while the crowd cheered. "You were spying on me." James's first reaction wasn't guilt or regret. It was fury. He lunged forward, snatching my phone out of my hands and deleting the video. "I can't believe you followed me, Linda. We're old now. Why are you acting so childish?" he snapped. "Emma has breast cancer. She doesn't have much time left. Her last wish was to have a wedding with me. How could I deny a dying friend such a simple request? We didn't tell you because we didn't want to upset you, but now you're making a scene." I stared at him, completely unfazed. He spoke as if throwing a grand wedding with another woman. A wedding I had never had was a trivial matter. Even now, he wasn't trying to make amends. He was shifting all the blame onto me. "Come on, Mom," Grace chimed in impatiently. "At your age, you should be above all this. You're jealous of a dying woman. That's pathetic." Grace hadn't even let me speak before choosing his side. His wife Jessica tugged at his arm, clearly uncomfortable. "Grace, that's enough." Meanwhile, my 1-year-old grandson Ben cried from the tension in the room. Grace, who had spoiled him endlessly, finally went silent. But before storming off with his family, he shot me a glare as if I were the one ruining everything. And just like that, I was left alone with James. "Look at what you did," he sighed, straightening his sleeves and sinking onto the couch. "You had to bring this up in front of everyone. Now the whole house is upset." I was done. Calmly I reached into my bag, pulled out the divorce papers I had prepared, and placed them on the coffee table. "James, let's get a divorce." His face was almost amusing, as if he truly believed I would swallow his excuses and forgive the man who had stood at the altar with another woman. "Linda, enough with the tantrum," he snapped. "We're in our 70s. We're not young anymore. Can't you just let it go?" He was right about one thing: we weren't young anymore. I never imagined that, at this stage in my life, I would have to face the harsh reality that the man I spent 15 years with was nothing more than a liar and a coward. But age was exactly why I couldn't afford to waste another second on him. "Exactly," I said, my voice steady. "We're not young anymore, which is why I need to leave. I refuse to spend the rest of my life feeling neglected, unloved, and unwanted. I won't let my final years be filled with regret. We're done. I've packed my things. Whatever's left you can keep. I'll be gone by morning." James stared at me, his emotions a mixture of confusion and anger. He glanced at the divorce papers and hesitated. "Are we really going to end things like this?" I didn't respond. I turned to leave when he called out, "Fine, I'll sign. I admit I was wrong. I shouldn't have hidden it from you. If you ever need anything, you can still reach out. Let's part on good terms. As friends." I just shook my head without looking back. There was nothing left to say. The next morning, I wheeled my suitcase to the door. Grace was already up. He saw me, saw the suitcase, and yet instead of offering to help his 70-year-old mother carry her things, his only concern was, "Mom, you're being ridiculous. You and Dad have been together forever. How can you just divorce him like that? Who's going to cook? Who's going to clean? Who's going to take care of Ben? You're making a big deal out of nothing. Dad was just doing something nice for Emma. They didn't do anything else. Why are you being so unreasonable?" As Grace continued his relentless accusations, I finally saw him for what he truly was, a thankless, selfish man. A son I had raised for over 30 years. Only to realize now that I had spent my life nurturing nothing but an ingrate. I nearly lost my life giving birth to him, an amniotic fluid embolism. It was a miracle both of us survived that day. I almost died on that hospital bed just to bring him into this world. And when he was little, he was everything a mother could hope for, obedient, kind. It was this same little boy who once swore to protect me when he grew up. Yet now, that same child was the one who dismissed me, who hurt me the most. I couldn't bear to look at him any longer. Every second in his presence, every word he uttered, only deepened my disappointment. Without sparing him another glance, I struggled to push my suitcase toward the door, quickly changed my shoes, and stepped outside. 70 years of life. And I had finally learned how fleeting everything was. I left that house with only one suitcase. The rest, none of it mattered. Grace, frustrated that I wasn't responding, grabbed an empty glass from the counter and hurled it into the trash can. The sharp shatter of glass echoed through the room, its sound piercing and final. Just like that, our bond as mother and son fractured beyond repair. I turned to look at him one last time from the doorway, but as I did, whatever lingering affection I had for him dissolved completely. "Grace Torres, I am not your maid. I am your mother. What makes you think it's my duty to cook, clean, and serve you? Maybe I spoiled you too much all these years. That's why you've turned into this. You have let me down, Grace. I hope that after I leave, you'll take a moment to reflect on everything I've done for this family." And with that I was done. I didn't care if he had more to say. I didn't care if he wanted to argue. I turned and walked away. Even after stepping outside, I could still hear things being slammed around inside. But that wasn't my concern anymore. The moment I walked out that door, I stopped living for them. I left James's house and returned to an apartment that was still in my name. Sitting alone in that quiet space, I looked back on the past few decades and realized none of it had ever really belonged to me. I met James through a mutual friend. He was a year older than me at the time, just a fresh college graduate, while I was a girl who had started working right after high school, struggling to survive on my own for nearly 5 years. James was young, handsome, and considerate. Back then he worried that we wouldn't have much in common due to our different educational backgrounds. So I stayed up night after night, studying topics that interested him just so he wouldn't find me lacking. I knew he had once been in a long-term relationship, 3 years. A love he never got a chance to hold on to. She broke up with him because the long relationship became too much. I didn't hold it against him. In fact, I pitied him. I pitied the effort he had poured into that relationship only to be left behind. So I made a vow to myself. I would make up for what he lost. I would take care of him in ways his ex never did. When he was buried in his thesis, I stayed up with him in the library, helping him gather research. When he struggled to find a job after graduation, I ironed his shirts, polished his shoes, and accompanied him to every interview. When work got tough and he came home drunk from company dinners, I wiped him down, changed his clothes, and stayed by his side through the night. I thought he had married me because my devotion, my love had finally reached him. We spent 15 years together, not a passionate romance, but a steady companionship. We never fought much, but we also never had a love story worth remembering. Looking back, I was never his choice. I was just the woman he settled for after losing the one he really wanted. And the moment she reappeared, he left without hesitation, without a second thought. But none of that mattered anymore. I still had time, and for the rest of my years, I would no longer waste a single moment on him. When news of my divorce spread, my friends were stunned, but they didn't judge me. They didn't question my decision, or try to talk me out of it. Instead, they simply stayed by my side, just as they always had. Grace, on the other hand, wouldn't stop pestering me. He sent message after message, repeating the same nonsense, telling me I was too old to think clearly, that I was embarrassing the family by insisting on this divorce, and that I would regret it one day. But his words no longer had any effect on me. A few days later I blocked his number completely. Without James and Grace in my life, my days became blissfully simple. For the first time in decades, I only had to think about myself, what I wanted to eat, what I wanted to. I didn't have to cater to anyone else's preferences, or put anyone else's needs before my own. After a month of peaceful solitude, I made a decision. I was going to travel. That thought struck me unexpectedly one afternoon, as I sat in my apartment watching a travel agency ad on TV. Suddenly I remembered who I used to be, before James, before marriage, before motherhood. I had dreams. I worked hard not just to survive, but because I wanted to see the world. I wanted to travel, to go anywhere and everywhere my heart desired. But then life happened. I put James first. I put my family first. And my dream of traveling got buried, forgotten, left to collect dust in some dark corner of my mind. Even the trips I did take over the years were never truly mine. I went where James wanted to go, where Grace wanted to go, and even then, I was never free to simply enjoy myself. I was always the one taking care of them, making sure they were happy, ensuring everything went smoothly. Not this time. This time I was going for me. Before I could overthink it, I picked up my phone and booked myself on a group tour. It turned out to be the best decision I had ever made. For the first time in my life, I traveled for myself. I tasted food I had never tried before. I saw breathtaking sights I never thought I would witness with my own eyes. Along the way, I met women just like me, women who had spent their lives putting others first, only to find themselves standing alone in their later years. But they weren't bitter, they weren't regretful. If anything, they were full of life. By the end of the trip, we had already made plans to keep in touch. Some of them even talked about moving into the same retirement community so we could spend our golden years together. Every day of the trip, I took photos of the places I visited, the moments I wanted to remember, and I shared them on Instagram, letting my friends see what I was up to. Their comments poured in, full of excitement and relief. They had been worried about me, afraid I wouldn't be able to move on from the divorce. But seeing me like this, traveling, smiling, thriving, finally put their concerns to rest. The only downside, James still followed my account. He liked every single post. Sometimes he even left comments saying how happy he was to see me enjoying myself. But to me it was all just an act, a pathetic attempt to ease his own guilt. I ignored every one of his interactions, refusing to let his presence taint my happiness. I didn't care what he thought anymore, whether he was sincere or not, whether he regretted his choices or not. It had nothing to do with me. All that mattered was that I was happy, and I was truly happy indeed. After a month of travel, I finally returned home. The moment my plane landed, exhaustion hit me, but I knew there was still plenty to do: unpacking, cleaning, settling back in. Before tackling all of that, I decided to step out for a bit. There was a small cafe downstairs that I frequent. A warm latte and a simple pastry seemed like the perfect way to ease back into normal life. But the moment I pushed open the cafe door, I spotted an unexpected visitor. A woman I had never really seen before, but somehow knew. She looked me over with a knowing smirk before speaking. "You must be Linda, right? You look better in person. Not really like what James said, that you were so aged." Emma was sitting across from me, wearing a well-tailored dress. She had gone all out with her hair and makeup, clearly intending to make an impression. She smiled at me as if we were old friends, her face gleaming with a hint of smugness. Her praise felt almost sarcastic, especially considering the contrast between her polished appearance and mine, fresh off a long journey, too tired to even freshen up. I probably looked like a wrinkled old woman next to her. Wasn't Emma supposed to be in the late stages of breast cancer? From the outside she didn't look sick at all. I didn't respond to her compliment, so she awkwardly laughed, and then adopted a soft, soothing tone as she spoke again. "Hi, I'm Emma, a longtime friend of James's. He's mentioned you many times, but we've never had the chance to meet properly. I heard you just returned from a long trip." I sat down across from her with a blank expression, merely nodding in response, not interested in continuing the conversation. But Emma, as if ignoring my indifference, continued talking as though I hadn't spoken at all. "You must be tired and nostalgic after being away from home for so long, right? At our age, We become more sentimental. Life's been long, full of both gains and losses. James and I, for instance, had to end our relationship because the long distance was just too hard. Honestly, we've always had feelings for each other, but we let go because it was too painful. She paused, her smile deepening, her eyes glinting with an almost proud, wistful air. Now, after all these years, we're both old and gray. We don't want any regrets left between us. At that, I couldn't help but laugh out loud. So, to make up for your past love regrets, I'm supposed to willingly give up almost 15 years of my life and let you two be together? I said, my voice laced with sarcasm. Linda, I know we were wrong to you, Emma began, as if she hadn't heard me at all. But who can control feelings? You know, a few months ago, I was misdiagnosed with breast cancer. When I heard that news, I felt like my world was falling apart. I was in such a panic. I reached out to James. I thought he wouldn't even want to see me, but to my surprise he came to me. A soft smile crossed Emma's face, one that seemed to drip with both joy and a touch of pride, as though she was hoping I would react to this love story of theirs. But I wasn't interested. I didn't. Still, she kept talking, oblivious to my lack of response. You don't know how scared he was when he heard about my cancer diagnosis. He held me and cried for so long. I was so moved. After all these years, I didn't expect that James would still have feelings for me. She leaned forward, her voice growing more animated as she continued. That's why when I asked him to throw us a big grand wedding, he was like a little boy, so excited. He promised me I'd be the happiest bride in the world. And it was him constantly running around, handling all the wedding preparations for us. I raised an eyebrow, now understanding why James had been working late every day these past few months. It was all for her, for their wedding. Everything had been right in front of me, but I had been too numb from all these years of monotony to truly see it. I was losing my patience, unable to tolerate any more of this woman boasting about how much my ex-husband loved her, so I cut her off. I was no longer able to listen any longer. You don't need to tell me about your love life. Honestly, I don't care. Whatever happens between you two from now on has nothing to do with me, I said flatly. With that, I stood up, called the waiter to pay, and grabbed my packaged croissant to head home. Are you in such a hurry to leave? Emma asked, a hint of hurt in her voice. I still have so much more to say, but if you don't want to listen, then fine. I've said too much and upset you, she added, her phony act making me sick. Since she was asking for it, I had no reason to spare her feelings anymore. I paused, turned back, and with a firm voice, I spoke directly to Emma's overly dramatic face. Seriously, can you at least have some dignity at your age? Here's the thing. Knowing full well that James was married, you stole my husband and shamelessly had a wedding with him. You're openly the third party in our marriage. You don't need to sugarcoat your twisted love story with all this talk of passion. If you truly loved him, would you have waited 15 years to finally get together? What were you two doing all that time? My voice wasn't loud, but it was clear and firm. The entire cafe suddenly fell silent, their attention shifting to our table. Emma clamped her mouth shut, her eyes beginning to water, and once again she slipped into the victim role, playing for sympathy. Linda, what are you even saying? She began. Just then James rushed in, looking disheveled and frantic. Upon seeing Emma's swollen eyes, he hurried over to her, pulling her into a tight embrace. His concern was so exaggerated, it made my stomach turn. I know you're hurting, but this isn't Emma's fault, James said defensively. If you're upset, take it out on me, don't blame her. I was about to laugh in disbelief. The audacity of them. Those two were in the wrong, but somehow I was the one getting blamed. Then from across the cafe, someone suddenly spoke up. I think I've seen these two online recently. Didn't they just have a huge public wedding? The entire cafe fell silent for a moment, before murmurs began to spread. Whispers quickly grew into full-blown discussions. All eyes turned to me, their expressions shifting as they absorbed what they had just heard. Suddenly I was no longer James's rightful wife. No longer the woman who had spent 15 years in a marriage raising a family. To them I was just a bitter, shameless old woman trying to ruin a love story decades in the making. The conversations around me grew louder, and soon the accusations began. How disgraceful. At her age, still trying to steal another woman's husband. Exactly, Emma and James are the real couple. They've been in love for so many years. This woman just can't let go. Look at her, so aggressive. Trying to pick a fight. No wonder he left her. The words were cutting, relentless. In the eyes of these strangers, I had somehow become the homewrecker. James, who had been standing frozen in the chaos, seemed to hesitate, perhaps even thinking of clearing things up. His gaze flickered to me, filled with something that almost looked like guilt. But Emma wasn't about to let that happen. She had the upper hand now, and she was going to make sure I bore the weight of every insult thrown my way. Right on cue, Emma clutched her chest, her face contorting in pain as she leaned weakly into James's arms. James, I don't feel well. What if the doctors were right? What if the cancer diagnosis wasn't a mistake after all? And just like that, Emma crumpled into his embrace, feigning unconsciousness. James panicked immediately, and whatever guilt he had felt, whatever intention he had to defend me, evaporated in an instant. Emma, stay with me, he cried, his voice full of frantic concern. He didn't even look back at me, didn't care that moments ago I had been the one being humiliated. No, his only concern was Emma. He scooped her up in his arms and rushed toward the exit, barking for someone to call an ambulance. The bystanders who had been gossiping about me just moments ago were now hurrying to help him, pulling out their phones offering to call for assistance. Me, I was nothing. No one cared about my side of the story. No one wanted to hear the truth. I stood there for a moment, watching the scene unfold, then turned and walked away. There was no point in staying in that wretched place a second longer. By the time I made it back to my empty apartment, I barely had the strength to take off my coat before collapsing onto the couch. And for the first time in a long, long time, I let myself cry. I cried until my chest ached. I cried for all the years I had wasted, for the humiliation I had suffered, for the sheer infuriating injustice of it all. James was a selfish, heartless bastard. He had thrown me aside, trampled on our decades of marriage, and now he didn't even have the decency to acknowledge what I had endured. He didn't care that I was being ridiculed, that strangers were tearing me apart with their words. Why did he get to act like the victim? Why did I, his wife of 15 years, have to endure the humiliation of being called a homewrecker? And worst of all, why did I have nothing to prove that I had ever been part of his life at all? The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. In 15 years of marriage, James and I had never had a proper wedding. In our early years, when money was tight, we hardly ever took photos together. Later, when we moved houses, I had left behind whatever few pictures we did have. At this point, the only undeniable proof of our relationship was the son we shared. Grace. That ungrateful, selfish excuse for a son. But even Grace had long since turned his back on me. I knew he had heard about what happened at the cafe. I knew because my phone had been buzzing non-stop with messages from him. Not a single one asked if I was okay. Not a single one showed concern for what I had gone through. No, Grace had only one thing to say. He called me cruel, a heartless, spiteful old woman. He accused me of making a scene, of pushing Emma too hard, of causing her to faint. "Why did you have to go and do this, Mom?" he wrote. "What was the point of making everything worse? Emma was being nice to you, and you just had to stir up drama. What's wrong with you? You don't even care that you nearly put her back in the hospital, do you? That was my son. The child I had nearly died giving birth to. The boy I had raised, loved and sacrificed for. And now he was calling me a monster." At that moment I had no choice but to face the truth I had been avoiding for far too long. I had made so many mistakes in my life. I had married the wrong man, I had given birth to the wrong son. And I had wasted 15 years on people who had never truly loved me. In this digital age, scandals spread faster than wildfire. What happened at the cafe, my confrontation with Emma, her dramatic fainting, James rushing her to the hospital. It was all caught on camera by nosy bystanders. Within hours the video had gone viral. But of course, the footage didn't include my accusations against Emma. The clip that made its rounds online only showed James berating me, demanding to know why I was tormenting his beloved Emma. The person who posted it didn't even try to be neutral. They outright framed it as James heroically defending his true love from a jealous, vengeful ex-wife trying to steal him away. Imagine that. 15 years of marriage, betrayed and discarded, and now I was being painted as the mistress. The comments were ruthless. Hundreds, no thousands of strangers tore into me, calling me despicable, pathetic, shameless. An old woman trying to ruin a beautiful love story. She had her chance, and James clearly moved on. Why is she still clinging? Emma is so elegant and kind, and yet this bitter ex-wife is harassing her. What a disgrace. I tried once, just once, to post a statement, to say my piece, to tell the truth, but my words were immediately drowned out by waves of new comments, fresh insults, burying my voice before it could even be heard. And perhaps if things had just continued this way, internet would have moved on in a few days. People would have forgotten me, found a new scandal to obsess over. But then Grace, the son I had given my life to raising, drove the final nail into the coffin. At the height of the controversy, when my name was still trending in the worst way possible, he posted a photo online, not a photo of me, not even an old family picture with James. It was a picture of Emma and James, hand in hand gazing at each other with deep affection. Behind them Grace and his wife stood smiling, a picture-perfect happy family. And beneath it the caption read, "As long as my family is together, that's all that matters." My own son, publicly choosing her over me. To the internet that was all the proof they needed. If my own child was supporting Emma, then clearly I was the problem. I watched helplessly as the hatred against me intensified. Even her son doesn't want her around. That says it all. She must have been a nightmare as a wife and mother if her family abandoned her like this. This is embarrassing. Imagine being so bitter, your own kid turns against you. I didn't know how to fight back. I asked my friends to speak up for me, to post the truth, but it didn't matter. Their words were drowned out, ignored, just like my marriage. Just like my place in my own family. And so I stopped trying. For days I barely left my apartment. I shut myself off from the world, learned to endure the loneliness. I spent my time in silence, trying to rebuild the pieces of myself that had been shattered. But then something unexpected happened. The women I had met during my trip, the friends I had made, found me one afternoon. They showed up at my door unannounced, and when they saw the state I was in, hollow-eyed, drained, utterly exhausted from the weight of it all, each one of them reacted with the same fierce emotion. "My dear friend, we've only been apart for a week, and now I can't believe what they've done to you. No matter what the internet says, we know the truth. That woman, she has liar written all over her face. And James, an old fool, running around playing romantic hero like he's still in his 20s. Pathetic. And don't even get me started on that son of yours, posting that picture just to humiliate you, absolutely unforgivable." Hearing them speak up for me, without hesitation, without doubt, I lost it. The floodgates broke, and for the first time in weeks, I let myself cry, not because I was sad, but because I was overwhelmed. Because these women, whom I had only known for a month, believed in me, more than the people I had spent my entire life loving. And when the tears subsided, when my breathing steadied, I finally let it all out. I told them everything, every injustice, every betrayal, every moment I had spent bending over backward for people who never once appreciated me. By the time I was done, something in me had shifted, like a long-held burden had finally been lifted. I wiped my face, took a deep breath, and sat up straighter. "Screw James," I declared, a newfound lightness in my voice. "Who cares? Let him have Emma. I wouldn't take him back if he begged. And Grace, that ungrateful bastard, he wants Emma as his mother. Fine, he can have her. I'm done with him too." My friends exchanged relieved glances. "We were worried you wouldn't be able to let go," one of them admitted. "But seeing you like this, we should have known better." "Enough about those losers," another chimed in. "Let's talk about us. Are we still looking at that retirement home together?" Outside, the gray clouds that had lingered for days began to part. Sunlight streamed through my apartment window, warm and golden, and inside, for the first time in a long time, I wasn't alone. We sat together, laughing, talking, making plans for the future, not just about the retirement home, but about our next trip. Because there was still so much of the world left to see, and this time I was going to live for myself. Day by day, my life gradually returned to peace, while James's world, on the other hand, descended into chaos. The moment our divorce was finalized, Emma wasted no time moving into James's house. At first, everything seemed picture perfect. Grace, blinded by his infatuation with Emma's polished demeanor, treated her as a second mother, convinced she was more graceful, more elegant and more worthy than I was. James, still lost in the fantasy of their rekindled romance, doted on her endlessly, but illusions never last long, and soon reality came crashing down. Without me in the house, no one was there to cook, clean or keep things running smooth. Grace, unwilling to spend money on a housekeeper or trust an outsider in their home, subtly hinted that Emma should take over. After all, wasn't it only natural for the lady of the house to handle domestic responsibilities? Wanting to earn their approval, Emma made an effort. Briefly, she tried to cook, clean, and even look after Grace's child. But Emma was no housewife. She had spent her life being taken care of, not taking care of others. She had no interest in learning, no patience for domestic chores. The results were disastrous. Her cooking was either bland, burnt, or dangerously undercooked. Within a week, James and Grace lost several pounds, and one near case of food poisoning nearly sent them to the hospital. Laundry. She left clothes sitting damp in the washing machine for hours, sometimes days, until they had to be washed all over again. Babysitting. She was more interested in watching TV than paying attention to little Ben. He fell, bumped his head, and cried himself hoarse multiple times while she sat oblivious on the couch. The final straw came one night, when she prepared Ben's formula with boiling water without cooling it down. The baby screamed in agony, and the entire family spent the night at the emergency room. That was the moment Grace snapped. You don't work, you don't contribute financially, and yet you can't even take care of a child. What good are you? He yelled at her, fury blazing in his eyes. Emma, already fed up with the endless chores and complaints, exploded right back. Oh, so now it's my fault. Maybe you should think about your failures instead. Like how you're a grown man too cheap to hire a damn housekeeper, and let me remind you, I'm your father's wife, not some maid for the Torres family. I don't owe you a damn thing. Grace, now completely enraged, pointed a trembling finger at her. What wife? You're nothing but a washed-up mistress who weaseled her way into this house. And let's not forget, you and my dad aren't even legally married. So as far as I'm concerned, you're not family. Emma's face twisted with fury. Oh, now you care about family? Where was this energy when you and your father forced her out? What's the matter, regretting it now, thinking of begging her to come back? She grabbed James's arm, desperate for backup. But James, tired and defeated, remained silent. He simply stood there, his face dark with exhaustion, unwilling to take sides. For the first time it seemed even he had grown weary of the endless fights. The shouting match continued, the air growing so loud that a doctor had to step in to tell them to be quiet. They didn't listen. It wasn't until hospital security was called that they were finally forced to leave. Unfortunately for them, a bystander had recorded everything. Within hours the video was uploaded online, where it exploded, and this time, the internet saw the truth. People connected the dots. This was the same Emma from the previous viral scandal, the poor innocent woman James had protected from his evil ex-wife. Turned out she was nothing more than a manipulative homewrecker. The outrage was immediate. People dug up my old statement, the one everyone had ignored. Now my story finally had an audience. So let me get this straight. This woman broke up a 15-year marriage, then played the victim. James and his son threw away a real wife and mother for this. Grace Torres is the worst. He publicly humiliated his own mother just to praise a mistress. Absolutely disgusting. Linda, if you ever see this, we believe you. You deserved better than these horrible people. The backlash was swift and brutal. James, Grace and Emma became public enemies overnight. Grace's job in sales relied heavily on reputation, and after this, his boss conveniently found a reason to let him go. With his name now toxic, he couldn't find another job. Unemployed and frustrated, he spent his days at home arguing with Emma non-stop, threatening to throw her out. James, caught in the middle, could do nothing. One side was the woman he had waited for, the love of his life. But the other side was his only son, whose life had been destroyed because of Emma. Whichever choice he made, he lost. So instead he just gave up. He spent his days sitting by the window staring blankly into the distance, sighing endlessly. Meanwhile, Jose's wife Jessica became the only functioning adult in the household. She worked full-time, then came home to cook, clean and care for their son, completely overworked, completely exhausted. Finally, when she couldn't take it anymore, she reached out to me. Mom, when are you coming back? We need you. The house is falling apart without you. Her message arrived just as I was mid-spin, dancing in the arms of a charming man I had met at the ballroom. I glanced at my phone, then with a smirk, I turned it over and ignored it. I was finally living for myself, and I wasn't going back. Fernando was a man around my age. His wife had passed away 10 years ago, and though he never remarried, he found solace in dance at the ballroom. He was a regular, warm, elegant and effortlessly charming. People gravitated toward him, drawn to his kindness. Tonight he was patiently guiding me through a step, correcting my posture with the same gentle encouragement I had once given James, leading him step by step toward his own success. But the peace didn't last long. Jessica had mentioned that since I wasn't answering my messages, Grace was growing impatient. Just as I had expected, he found me the moment he saw me dancing, laughing, enjoying myself with Fernando. His face twisted with fury. "Mom, what the hell are you doing?" He stormed forward, shoving Fernando aside, and positioning himself between us. "The house is in complete chaos, and you're here dancing with some stranger." I ignored him, brushing past him to check on Fernando. "I'm so sorry about that," I said softly. Fernando just smiled, waving it off like it was nothing. "Don't worry, if you need me I'll be right here," he said. Grace, seeing that I wasn't even acknowledging his tantrum, stuck to me like glue. "Mom, you're not young anymore. It's not safe for you to live alone, let alone go to some retirement home. Nothing is more comfortable than your own house. I'm taking you home right now. There's a big dinner waiting for you. Dad misses you, he talks about you all the time, begging me to bring you back. Whatever misunderstanding there was, you two just need to talk it out. Couples fight, it's normal." He droned on, his voice grating on my nerves. "Enough, Grace." I snapped, "My ears are hurting from listening to you." Before he could argue, my wonderful group of friends, the ones who had stood by me through everything, arrived. They were all smiles when they saw me, but the second their eyes landed on Grace, their expressions shifted. Their warmth turned to cold, cutting sarcasm. Well. What kind of wind blew this guy over?" one of them said. "The same Grace who ignored his mother's pleas before. What a miracle." I knew they were taking revenge on my behalf. I didn't stop them, in fact, I smirked and added. "Exactly. A dead man suddenly coming back to life. It's honestly terrifying." Grace's face darkened at my words, but my friends weren't done. "Let's not forget you're the one who threw your mom out. You're the one who welcomed the homewrecker into your house, and now you're crawling back. Hilarious, your mom is thriving. She has us, she has new friends, and let's be honest, she's having way more fun now than she ever did living as your maid. Actually, fun isn't even the right word, she's ecstatic. Meanwhile, your home is crumbling to pieces. Sounds like someone's just jealous that their mother is happier without them," another friend added. They laughed and I laughed with them. It was funny, I had spent decades suffering in that house, only to realize that the moment I left I had my freedom, my peace, my happiness, while they, James, Grace and Emma, were miserable. Grace opened his mouth, hesitated, then forced himself to swallow his pride. His voice turned pitiful. "Mom, I know I was wrong, can you forgive me just this once? Emma is gone. I kicked her out. You don't have to worry anymore, you can come home now." I shook my head. "I'm not going back." Grace's face crumbled, and then, to my utter disbelief, he dropped to his knees right there in front of everyone, crying like a child. Theatrics. More theatrics, and I was done watching the performance. One of my friends sighed, unimpressed, and grabbed my arm. "Come on, let's not waste time on him, let's go dance." I let them lead me away without hesitation, because the truth was, from the moment James and Grace had chosen to protect Emma over me, they ceased to matter. And I had a life to live. Just as we were about to leave, Grace's phone rang. It was Jessica. I didn't know what she said, but whatever it was, it shocked Grace so much that his phone slipped from his hands and crashed onto the floor. For a long moment he just stood there, frozen, his face drained of color. A horrible thought struck me. It's not Ben, is it? My grandson was innocent in all this. No matter what had happened between me and his father, I would never want anything to happen to him. Grace? Answer me. What happened? Is it Ben? I was frantic, ready to shake him if I had to, but no matter how many times I asked, he just stood there, dazed and unresponsive. Minutes passed before he finally snapped out of it, and when he did, tears streamed down his face, his entire body trembling as he let out a gut-wrenching sob. "Mom, please come with me to the hospital." His voice cracked. Dad had a stroke. He's in critical condition. The doctor says he might not make it." Despite everything, despite all the resentment I had built up, my heart still faltered for a second. I had spent half a century by James's side. Even if he had hurt me, Even if I no longer loved him, I couldn't deny what we had once shared. I stood there torn, caught between the past and the present. Should I go? Should I even care? Sensing my hesitation, my friend stepped in, their voice was gentle yet firm. Linda, if you want to go then go. We know you've moved on, but that doesn't mean you can erase 15 years over. That's right, whether you care for him or not anymore, seeing him one last time won't change the life you've built now, but if you don't go you might regret it later. They were right, I wasn't doing this for James, I was doing it for myself. So, without another word, I followed Grace to the hospital to say goodbye. It had been months since I last saw James, and yet here he was, hooked up to machines, his frail body covered in wires and monitors, still unconscious. Through the glass window of the hospital room, I stood motionless. Jessica looked at me with pleading eyes, clutching my hand as she whispered, "Mom." I didn't respond. I didn't step inside, I just kept staring at the man lying in that bed. To say I felt nothing would be a lie. 15 years of marriage, no matter how much pain it had brought me, couldn't be erased so easily. It wasn't love anymore, but there was something else, something closer to family. The weight of shared history pressed down on my chest. Grace, on the other hand, was inconsolable. He crouched on the floor, sobbing, his hands gripping his hair as he kept repeating, How did this happen? Dad was fine this morning, how did this happen?" Jessica's face darkened, her frustration bubbling over. "Isn't it obvious? It's because of that woman. She's the reason James ended up like this." My stomach twisted. "What happened? Tell me everything," Jessica scoffed, her voice laced with disdain. "You have no idea how awful she really is," she exhaled sharply, then began explaining. "After we threw her out, she disappeared for a few days. We thought she was gone for good, but no, she suddenly came back with some old man we'd never seen before and paraded him in front of James. James was furious. He told her to get out and never come back. But today, she returned again, hair a mess, looking completely unhinged. I was home at the time, but I figured it was their business, so I stayed upstairs and didn't interfere." Jessica swallowed hard, her voice breaking. "I overheard everything. She wanted to reconcile, to come back. James refused, so she threatened him, said if he didn't take her back she'd never leave." Jessica hesitated, her hands trembling. "I couldn't take it anymore, so I finally went downstairs to tell her off. But before I even reached them, I heard their argument escalate, then a loud thud. By the time I got there, she was gone, and James..." Her breath hitched. James was on the floor, unconscious, blood pooling around his head. He hit the corner of the table when he collapsed. I panicked and called an ambulance immediately, but it was too late. The doctor said it was a stroke. Grace, shaking with rage, shot to his feet and stormed toward the exit. "I'll find that myself, I'll make her pay," Jessica blocked him. "I already called the police. You need to stay here and wait for your father to wake up." My gaze drifted back to James's lifeless form, still unmoving in his hospital bed. I sighed a long, tired sigh. I wasn't sure what I was feeling, pity, resentment, closure. Then suddenly a voice called out, "Who here is Linda? The patient keeps calling for her." A doctor rushed out, scanning the room. I lifted my hands slightly. "That's me, come quickly," he urged. "He just regained consciousness, but his condition is critical. He won't stop asking for you." One last time, I thought to myself, one last meeting, and then we would be done forever. When I stepped inside, James struggled to lift his hand, as if reaching for me, but his body was too weak. He could only stare. "Linda, you came," his voice was barely a whisper. "I thought you wouldn't want to see me again." I didn't answer. I simply walked to the side table, intending to pour him a glass of warm water. "No, don't," he shook his head weakly. "You don't have to do anything for me anymore. I was the one who failed you." His voice cracked as tears slid down his wrinkled cheek. "Linda, all these days, I finally realized just how good you were to me. I was blind, selfish. I never appreciated you until it was too late." He wept. I set the cup down. There was no need for me to serve him anymore. "James," I said, my voice steady, "I know you want my forgiveness, but I'm not going to give it to you." His lips trembled, his eyes filled with regret. "You wasted 15 years of my life. How could I possibly forgive that?" He fell silent, slowly, his expression crumbling under the weight of his own guilt. But I continued. "I don't hate you either, I just want us to live separately, without interfering in each other's lives ever again. Emma destroyed you and you should focus on recovering, staying away from her. As for me, I'm doing just fine. I live for myself now. I eat what I want, go where I want, surround myself with people who truly care about me. I don't have to walk on eggshells anymore, and for the first time in my life, I'm happy. I wasn't lying, the smile on my face wasn't forced. This was the happiest I had ever been. James noticed it too. His fingers twitched, but he said nothing. I turned to leave. Linda, James called out. I stopped, not looking back. If there's a next life, would you marry me again? I barely hesitated before answering. No, in my next life, I will marry someone who loves me, not someone whose heart belongs to another. James let out a broken cough, but he didn't argue, as we both knew I had already moved on. Leaving the hospital, I felt lighter than I had in years. For so long I had been bound by the weight of my past, a marriage that had taken more from me than it had ever given, a son who had chosen convenience over love, a life that had never truly felt like my own. But now I was free, and for the first time, I embraced that freedom wholeheartedly. The very next day I packed my bags. My friends and I had been talking for weeks about taking another trip together, and after everything, I knew there was no better time than now. We booked a month-long cruise through Europe, Italy, Greece, Spain and France. Just the thought of it made me giddy, like a girl setting out on her first grand adventure. We boarded the ship in Barcelona, the salty ocean breeze brushing against our skin, as we stood on deck watching the coastline disappear behind us. To new beginnings, one of my friends toasted that evening at dinner, raising her glass of wine. To freedom, another chimed in, and to never letting a man waste another second of our lives, I added with a laugh. We spent our days basking in the beauty of new places. In Rome we wandered through the ancient ruins of the Colosseum, the weight of history surrounding us, as we traced the steps of civilizations long gone. In Santorini, we watched the sun melt into the Aegean Sea, painting the sky in hues of gold and crimson, as we sipped on crisp white wine from a small family-run vineyard. In Paris we indulged in the most decadent pastries at a little café, tucked away from the bustling tourist crowds, laughing over stories of our youth, of old loves, lost dreams, and the incredible lives we were still building for ourselves. All the while I documented every moment. I filled my phone with pictures, not for anyone else, not for validation, but for me. This was my life now, a life where I woke up each morning with excitement instead of dread, a life where I no longer had to ask for permission to be happy. And in the quiet moments, when I sat by the water's edge, or stood beneath the glow of the Eiffel Tower, I realized something. I wasn't just happy, I was at peace. Months passed, and my friendships deepened. We weren't just travel companions anymore, we were family, and as for love, well, it found me when I least expected it. Fernando and I kept in touch after that night at the dance hall. When I returned from my travels, he invited me to dinner not as friends, but as something more, and for the first time in decades, I let myself feel again. He was patient, kind, and unlike James, he never made me feel like I needed to prove my worth. We danced, we talked for hours, and slowly, effortlessly, love crept back into my life, not the kind that demanded sacrifice, but the kind that celebrated freedom, individuality, and mutual respect. One evening, as we stood on the balcony of my apartment, watching the city lights flicker in the distance, he turned to me and asked, "Are you happy?" I didn't hesitate more than I ever thought possible, and that was the truth. I had lost so much, but in the end I had gained something far greater, myself.